Oh, baby, are we going to make a foray into the world of college hoops, both the men's and the women's side? Man, oh, man. This could have been this week's main event, quite frankly.
Yeah. So there is going to be a change coming to the women's NCAA tournament. And that change is really just going to impact Selection Sunday. So basically what's going to happen is I guess this year and maybe perhaps going forward, they are going to announce the top 16 teams, the teams that host during that first weekend of March Madness, that host games in the first and second round. They're going to unveil those teams the day before on Saturday. Now, they're not going to reveal the seed list, but they're going to basically announce them in alphabetical order, and we're going to know what teams are hosting on the day before Selection Sunday. And then Selection Sunday is going to come, and we're going to get the full bracket and the full seed list and everything. The NCAA Women's Basketball Committee said that they did this to basically give these campuses like an extra day to sort of prepare for hosting, which I think, which I get and I understand, and I think is probably a good move considering some of the hotel and other sort of issues we've perhaps had in the past couple of years in terms of like hosting sites. So I think this is a good thing mostly, even though I think it's going to be weird. I will also mention that like this is the protocol for the baseball tournament. They do the same thing there where they announce, you know, hey, here's everybody who's hosting the day before, and then the next day you get the full seed list and the full bracket. So, you know, on that Saturday, we're still not going to know like who the number one overall seed is or who even the top four are. We're just going to know, hey, these are the teams that are hosting. And then the next day, we're still going to get the full unveiled bracket.
Which you can make the argument of those 16 teams that host. I would argue each year, about 12 to 14 of them, you pretty much know who is going to host. So it's really just those two final three, maybe three spots. That's up for debate.
Certainly the top 10. And then like, depending on year to year, like how the resumes look and stuff and who's close and who's not close. Yeah. I think, you know, you're probably talking about like 4 spots that are really like up in the air and you're not sure like if you're going to host like, you know, those number 4 seeds or whatever. And, you know, so this happened last week at these NCAA meetings that the women's basketball selection committee had and the men's committee had. I think the women's meeting was in Philly and the men's was in Savannah, Georgia.
Which I don't know why it was in Savannah. I didn't know. I would have driven 2 hours up to go like chat it up with Charlie Baker and company because I was fascinated to know that filibuster to ensure we and it wasn't a filibuster, but I'm going to call it a filibuster to ensure we stay at 68 teams in the NCAA tournament was occurring 2 hours north of me.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, for right now, we're not expanding the tournament. Neither one of those committees came to a decision. I'm really not sure like what's going to happen on that front. You know, I had I don't know, how would I describe this person without giving it away? A very good source in the know, who would be close to these sort of like decision makings on the women's basketball side. Okay. Tell me that tournament expansion is imminent. Like it's going to happen. Now, I don't know if that means that's going to happen this year. It doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. I feel like if it was...
If you would ask people a week ago, though, they thought it was happening this year.
Right. So maybe that means it's imminent for like the near future. So maybe we're talking about the 2027 or 2028 tournament. But this person says that this is happening. Now, the question then becomes, okay, so are we going to 72 or are we going to, is the other number 76?
Yes, 76 will be the next number.
We're either
if you ask Coach
K, he would like
if you ask Coach K, he would like for it to be 322. But Mr. K, you are not going to win this one. As much as, yes, the powers that be at the NCAA want even more money because now they have to be paying member institutions restitution. But at the same time, I don't believe we're going to get to a world in which everyone makes the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and I think what's also interesting, just like in particular on the women's side, is we got that story from Front Office Sports last week that says that if they expand the women's tournament, it doesn't mean more money in terms of TV right revenue from ESPN. And I think that if we do expand the tournament, like you're going to have some pretty influential coaches. Dawn Staley is already one of them who's calling for basically ESPN to come back to the table. I think ESPN, with all due respect, is going to tell her to kick rocks. I just ESPN doesn't have any reason to come back to the table. As we talked about this over text, but as Howard Megdal laid out in his book, and I've written about this before and stuff too. The ESPN got a great deal in terms of the women's college basketball television package. I mean, they got an absolute steal. Like, and the NCAA, it is my opinion that they gave them a deal because ESPN is their longest standing and, longest partner in this thing. I just, to not put the NCAA women's basketball tournament out to a bid for like other media partners and like not give it to the highest bidder, I think was just an insane decision, and just diminish the value of your tournament. And so now you're in this situation where like the tournament might even grow and you're not even gonna like profit off of it. And so I just think it's a really bad place that the NCAA, Charlie Baker in particular, has put women's college basketball.
Well, especially when you juxtapose that with the impending and looming CBA negotiations for the WNBA, coupled with media rights questions, coupled with what was the beef last week on this podcast, the Nafisa Collier unrivaled conspiracy theory. But to her credit, the fact that Unrivaled, which of course she, Brianna Stewart, the co-founders of, went out to market, found a television rights deal with TNT, with Turner, and now are reaping the rewards of it. I go back to 2019 to give you guys, I think this might be the first ever in the history of the women's basketball podcast, an AEW reference. I remember when Jaguars co-owner Tony Khan announced his plans to start the wrestling company. And I remember one of the first things I talked to him off to the side about was, did you get a TV rights deal? And he said, yep, we can't announce it yet, but we have a legit one. And I remember kind of being skeptical, thinking like, okay, is it, for lack of a better term, Baller TV, Wave TV, is it some like indie stream it, Flow Sports? And then I was told a couple days later, no, it's Turner. And I was like, oh, yeah. Okay. And that is the driver because, as I have said time and time again, the most recession-proof commodity in television, in sports, is live game broadcasts. And so the fact that women's basketball at the collegiate level cannot truly maximize profits off of their play, it's a sin. It's an absolute sin.
And like you mentioned Turner, so Turner's going into this chapter of like their media future or whatever without the NBA, right? I bet Turner would have bid on the women's college basketball tournament, and maybe they wouldn't have because they have the men's tournament, but like
also you can't forget to, right, they have the men's tournament, coupled with that's their biggest entity, right, that they have a deal with, and the NCAA pearl clutches that deal with Turner. I don't believe they will ever take that to market. I could be wrong because I never thought the NBA would ever leave Turner, but
like I think about like how much we thought of and how good like the broadcasts were when like Fox had all those Iowa games showcasing Caitlin Clark. I thought
CBS,
Peacock,
NBC.
I thought Peacock did a really good job with women's college basketball. They've had some Big Ten games. Like I think there are other parties interested now, and I think like the Kaplan report, like the NCAA like to kind of poo-poo on that, but like that report came out before the 2023 Final Four when we had the big boom from the Caitlin Clark Angel Reese matchup. So like, that report said what it said, which is like this thing can be its own thing. And then you have the boom. And then you see even the ratings last year with no Caitlin Clark, with no Angel Reese. And they're still the best that they have ever been outside of the 2023-24 tournament. So like, I just like, as we get into this NCAA, will they or won't they expand? I just think like it puts women's college basketball like as a whole at a disadvantage because you're not able to capitalize off of the increased attendance and increased viewership and all that, increased eyeballs, and you're not going to get more money from ESPN. And that deal runs for a long time. I think there's 8 years left on it. something
Yeah,
like
I'm doing the
that.
math in my
So
head. Yeah. Mhm.
it was a long deal when it was announced. So yeah, it's not a great spot for the sport to be in, I don't think.
Like we said, this could have been this week's main event. So much to dive into when it comes to tournament expansion, what it means for media rights. I am sure we will hit on it again in the coming weeks, especially when you couple it with, as I alluded to, the ongoing CBA negotiations in the W and what media rights could look like professionally in women's basketball, in addition to at the collegiate level.